SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Have you been seriously injured? Mama Justice is here for you. Our medical team partners with top-notch doctors, surgeons, therapists, and urologists, ensuring a comprehensive recovery journey. If you've been injured, call Mama Justice today. We're here for you.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this Hump Day. All right, a new romance to talk about to start things off. It's Tiger Woods. You've probably seen this. The golfer extraordinaire, he apparently is dating one Vanessa Trump. It is official. Woods, man, this is hard for me to wrap my head around. He's 49. That's incredible. She 47. They've been linked together in recent weeks. The rumors started gaining some traction after the golfer attended the Genesis Open in San Diego with the president's granddaughter, Kai Trump. That was in February. I remember Kai. She was at the RNC. She's a big golfer, as well, playing for the Benjamin School in Jupiter, Florida. And since then, Vanessa and Kai were seen at Woods' TGL event in Florida. Woods' children, Charlie and Sam, also attend the Benjamin School in Palm Beach, Florida, alongside Kai. They're pretty good players in their own right. Well, this is kind of interesting, kind of neat to watch all of this unfold. She grew up on Manhattan's Upper East Side, was a model early on in her life. Well, there you go. How about that? Well, what about the markets? Let's start with that. The Dow up 187. The NASDAQ, however, there is a tech sell-off, and the NASDAQ's down almost the same amount, 185. So you got the Dow up, the NASDAQ down, and you got the funny money. Last I checked, crude oil has eclipsed the $70 mark. Expect the price of gas to go up at the pump soon as a result. What about the funny money? I don't see that this morning. Right?
It's up a little bit, or it's down from its highs. It got up to about 87, 88, but it's down to 86.9.
Okay. Interest rates, a 10-year yield up slightly. Yeah, it's Bitcoin down 656 to 86.9 at this moment in time. So, the president yesterday signed an executive order which would require folks who register to vote to be citizens. Does it just seem crazy that we even have to do that? But I guess that's where we are. Now, how does that affect us here in Mississippi? When you register to vote in Mississippi, they check a couple of databases, as I recall, to make sure you're a citizen. And I think recently legislation adds a federal database, the SAVE database, I believe is what it's called. And, of course, you sign an affidavit attesting that you are, in fact, a citizen. And if you lie on that form, that's punishable by law. It would be a serious offense. I don't think this is a huge problem in Mississippi, but I do think it's a big problem in other states.
Checking. It's actually the first thing on the registration form.
What's that?
The Mississippi, this is the mail-in voter registration application, but it's the one that you would print out, fill out, mail in.
Okay. It's
got the information. You can use this form if you're registering for the first time, an application. You may not register to vote if you live in an area. Vote, all the information. And then when you start filling out, the very first thing, are you a citizen of the United States of America, yes or no?
Okay. So I guess what I'm saying here, it's not, you don't shouldn't necessarily have to show up and provide some sort of document, right? I don't know what that would be. Exactly. I think what happens is your data is cross-referenced with some of these databases. Because didn't you and I review that you can actually get a driver's license in Mississippi even if you're not a citizen, right? You're shaking your head. I think so. So that's not proof. Now, a passport.
But the ID or license does have non-resident on it.
That's right. It does indicate that, but you can still get a license. But and that is one of the databases that is checked, by the way. I think when you mail in the form you were describing there, that's one of the databases that's checked.
I have no idea about the databases.
I looked it up yesterday, and my understanding is there are two different databases that are checked, and maybe we have to find out from the Secretary of State's office. And a third one was added with some legislation passed just as another cross-reference check. And I believe that is the SAVE database, what it's called, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. So many believe this is necessary, really, to restore public confidence in elections. I agree that I'd say public confidence in elections has declined somewhat. Of course, the usual group that are out there clutching the pearls and gnashing the teeth and wailing disapproval say that this could disenfranchise people, that an estimated 9% of U.S. citizens of voting age, or that's about 21 million people, do not have proof of citizenship readily available. Now, I don't think this means, does it, Rhino, that you have to prove your citizenship when you vote? Is that right? Or does it mean that, my understanding is it just means you have to prove your citizenship when you register to vote? Because in theory, you're not allowed to vote if you've registered, and if you're proving your citizenship when you've registered, well, then you've already gone through that exercise. The order says the U.S. has failed to enforce basic and necessary election protections, calls on states to work with federal agencies, because keep in mind that elections are administered or controlled by states, all the way down to the county level. The legislation also would pull federal funding from states if election officials don't comply. Interesting. I think this is good. I think it's sad that this is necessary because there's been so much finagling and manipulation of the election system in this country. And of course, the president is particularly focused on mail voting. He says that without evidence, it's insecure and invites fraud, even as he has shifted his position on this matter, encouraging people to vote by mail. And there are a lot of Republicans who support that as well, that like the convenience aspect of it. He admits fraud is rare, it's limited, and it gets prosecuted in cases where it's exposed and identified. But it's my understanding is this is more about proving your citizenship when you register. I don't think that's going to require us when we go to our precincts to pull out anything that proves citizenship. Although, if you use your license, as you indicate, if you're a citizen, there will be no statements on it, no statement on it that says non-citizen or whatever the language is that's imprinted on your license. That would be an indicator. You would think such a person would be turned away in Mississippi if they presented, as part of the photo ID presentation requirement, a driver's license that also included an indication that they're non-citizen, right? That would not suffice when you show up at the precinct. But I think this is more about the registration process. And in Mississippi, as you point out, it's a matter of attesting that you're a citizen and suffering the legal consequences if it's determined that you're not. And you lied on this form. I mean, wouldn't that, Rhino, sort of work the way other federal forms work, such as...
well, since it's a state form, it wouldn't have federal law.
Okay, you're right.
There is Mississippi Code section. Where's the warning on here? I know it's like $5,000 or imprisonment or something. It's on here somewhere.
Yeah, there's a penalty that's specified, right, in the legislation that requires you to sign this document and attest that you are a citizen. I mean, it's a legal binding document. Does it also have to be notarized, that document?
I think if you mail it in, yeah. Yeah,
I think so if you mail it in. If you go in person, you don't. We're stepping aside for a break. Robert Dozier, Executive Director of Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association at 11:05. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Redbone. I remember seeing them live on American Bandstand when they were when they had released that hit. It was maybe their
on
only
their way
one.
up the charts.
Yeah, exactly. All Native Americans, and they kind of dressed the part too. Remember, as part of their band regalia. Pretty cool. On the C Spire text line, which, by the way, is 601-879-4395. Joe in Quitman says, why not require a birth certificate or Social Security number for first-time registration? Well,
if you're registering for the first time in Mississippi and do not have a Mississippi driver's license or Social Security number, you must send with this application a copy of a current and valid photo ID or copy of a current utility bill, bank statement, government check, paycheck, or other government document that shows your name and address in this county.
But I don't think that...
But one correction, we did say it requires a notarization.
Yeah.
Doesn't require a notary.
Yeah, and Rhino and I were talking about that on the break. It really is of no value as part of the registration process because you still have to show your ID when you vote. So even if you registered fictitiously, that doesn't really allow you to vote unless you can show up with an ID that matches that fictitious registration. That ain't very likely. So, however, mail-in voting does require. You do want to make sure, notary, you do want to make sure that whomever is mailing in their ballot is in fact the person who signed it, and that's what a notary does, is attest that with their notarization. Joe says, why not require a birth certificate or Social Security number for first-time registration? Well, think about that, Joe. Everybody who's a citizen in this country that enjoys the privilege of voting was not necessarily born here. If they immigrated into this country and became a citizen through the normal legal process, which we encourage people to do, they're eligible to vote. But they wouldn't have a birth certificate that says they were born here. And then Social Security number, same thing. And by the way, non-citizens can actually obtain Social Security numbers. They're not eligible for Social Security retirement benefits. But if you're here under the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Work Authorization Program, you pay in. A lot of folks don't realize that. These people, they get Social Security numbers, or they get what are called ITINs, income tax identification numbers, so they can pay into the system. They pay taxes in and don't get anything out. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people that are quite crafty, as we know now, and you and I, Rhino, have been talking about this for about 3 years, and they scam the system just like they do with the dead-gum earned income benefits from the IRS. There are people out there that will send their tax returns in, and the IRS will say, wait a second, we already got one for you. No, I hadn't filed mine yet. And this is because people have stolen Social Security numbers, like the giant Equifax breach of a few years ago, where virtually every Social Security number in the country was released and obtained by nefarious actors. And this is what they use them for, to go file bogus tax returns. It's estimated that cost about $11 billion a year.
Almost like they were warned when the Social Security numbers came around that they shouldn't be used as an identification.
It's a bad system. That's exactly right. Using that one piece of data, that one data element, is just an overall bad system.
Funny factoid, I know this is not still going on, and I don't know exactly when it ended, but it was kind of like the icing on the cake for exchange students to come to America.
Right.
Especially if they were coming from countries that had very strict driving regulations. Like if you live in a Scandinavian country where you got to take 4 different weather type classes to learn how to drive, and you got to be 21 years old, and you got to pay through the nose. A lot of exchange students would come to America,
right,
to get an American driver's license that they could then take back home and bypass all of that because, well, I've already got a license to drive.
Yeah.
And the American driver's license was recognized as an international driver's license. And what brought this to mind was talking about the birth certificate and registering and all that was, can you imagine long before the days of Google Translate, somebody shows up with a birth certificate in a totally different language? It's like, just find the number on there that looks like a date. That's the one.
That's a good point. Now we have these digital tools that help us with that sort of stuff that are dead on accurate. It's pretty good. Sharon and Brandon says you have to have an ID to register your kids for school and a whole array of other things. Why not to register to vote and or actually vote? Well, good point. You do have to have one to vote in the state of Mississippi. You've got to have a photo ID. It doesn't necessarily prove that you're a citizen. You're supposed to prove that when you register. So if you're in the database when you arrive at the precinct to vote and they find you and look you up, if you're in there as a registered voter, in theory you proved well, you know what, Rhino? You didn't prove you attested to your citizenship. And they do run some checks against some databases to make sure. But I certainly agree that maybe we could beef that up a little bit. That might be a conversation we'll have with Secretary of State Michael Watson. And of course, that would require legislative action on the part of the Mississippi legislature. No doubt about it.
So we better start the ball rolling because it might be 15 years before they get around to it.
They'll come up with something that they'll squabble over, right?
Well, first you got to have an argument about which side's going to introduce the one they want. And then when they can't agree on that, they'll agree to a study committee. And you'll have 3 or 4 different study committees so that everybody gets a chance to lead one. So they all feel like they got to play a part in it. And that's about 6 years down the road. And after they've wasted all that time and energy, they'll try to craft another bill, and there'll be more arguments. So, all right, we'll go back to a study committee, and you just do this over and over, ad infinitum, until finally people are bored with it, and someone finally sneaks one through, and it gets passed.
You know, they need to engage in a little. His name is escaping me right now. The dang captain in Star Trek.
You got Kirk,
William Shatner. I know his real name, Captain Kirk. Right? Yeah.
James Tiberius.
That's it. Right. So what he always said to Scotty, down in the engine room, I need warp speed. Right. That's what we need here. Okay. So I just sent you something that you can take a look at. Now, I got to set this up for the folks. Yeah, I really try not to stereotype. I've been doing it more lately, I acknowledge. Maybe I should have given that up for Lent. I really do try not to stereotype and pigeonhole and profile and all that kind of stuff a person based on their physical appearance. I really do. I just absolutely give every benefit of the doubt. But here's another situation where this is so predictable. This is, I'm looking at a photo. I'm going to have Rhino describe it in a moment, but I'll tell you what it entails. North Carolina State Representative Allison Dahl, a Democrat, has introduced 2 bills, one to repeal laws that protect minors from genital mutilation surgeries, and another to repeal the North Carolina Parents' Bill of Rights. Now, please, Rhino, in the way that only you can, describe the physical appearance of this individual. Oh, my gosh.
Well, just first appearances. At first blush, the first thought that runs through my head is nuttier than squirrel crap. But let's see if we can describe her. We have the obligatory Karen shortcut dyed Kool-Aid highlighter pink, the gaudiest, gosh awful glasses that are supposed to be power glasses,
I gotta tell you,
but they don't.
That's the worst glasses I've ever seen.
They don't flatter anything about her look. She's got some weird looking tassel earrings that match her dress, but not her hair, which her glasses don't match anything. She's got this funky scarf as a neck accessory, but she didn't want to just go with one neck accessory, so she's got this little thin string of pearls, and then she has this like highlighter dyed pink dress, blouse, something. I can't see enough to tell you exactly what it is, but yeah, she's basically she's how nature would tell you to stay away. If you saw a creature in the wild that brightly colored, you would know they were toxic and poisonous. So looking at her, her ideas are toxic and poisonous to a sane society.
You omitted the very thin lips, which are, of course, covered in hot pink lipstick. And what about the bug eyes on her as well?
The crazy eyes.
Exactly.
The ones that give away crazy ideas in a split second.
Like allowing mutilization of children's genitals and basically telling parents, take a hike, you got no rights. You look the part. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth Studio, 601-879-4395. That's the old C Spire text line. So, are the states, this is Charles and Matheson, asked a question with respect to the president's executive order regarding voter registration and proof of citizenship to vote in this country. Are the states able to overrule the federal election voting requirements? You know, Rhino, how do you answer that? It seems like states and the federal government are in constant conflict and squabbling and filing lawsuits and that sort of stuff. I don't know that it's optional, but it doesn't mean they won't opt to do something, to defy it.
State laws cannot supersede federal laws, but that only ever really gets challenged when the opposing party is in the White House.
That's exactly right. And so I'm sure
the only time you'll ever hear a Democrat politician ever argue for anything even resembling states' rights is if Republicans have any control in D.C.
No doubt. And I haven't researched this, but I don't know, right, if this only applies to federal elections or if it applies to state and local. And the reason I say that, because isn't it New York that allows non-citizens to vote in its municipal elections, the city of New York? Seems like that. I know there was a push to do that. Maybe it didn't get through. Heck, there's all kinds of crazy things that non-citizens can do. Can't non-citizens, be members of the bar in California? I mean, they've done some crazy things with respect to latitude to non-citizens in that state, and they got a bunch of them. So I'm not sure. Good question, though, Charles. Let's see what else we got here on the C Spire text line. Ben from Madison says, in 2011, the citizens of Mississippi passed a ballot initiative to require an ID to vote because the legislature wouldn't act. It passed overwhelmingly. Remember it well. You're right, Ben. I've given her all she's got, Captain, says Dan in Hattiesburg. That, of course, the common refrain from Scotty whenever Captain Kirk would ask for more power, warp speed. That was awesome. Mo says, I saw that picture a while ago. That's the type you have to wonder if it is a woman. Amanda from Pike County says, maybe they are wearing scarves to hide an Adam's apple. Man, I don't know. It's just crazy just looking at some of these people. I don't know how the heck they get elected to office. It certainly wasn't based on her appearance. Must be something else going on. Of course, in North Carolina, it's quite possible she represents a really far left district that thinks she's just swell. We're running out of money again. Lawmakers are facing the old debt ceiling. Oh, geez, here we go again. It looks like it's going to come a little sooner than thought. And the president is pushing to get the debt ceiling extended. He does not want this to be an issue when we get to that point. So it looks like that somewhere between mid-July and early October, really depends on how tax collections go. And of course, it's tax season right now, so folks are sending in their money, those who owe taxes. And of course, you got corporate taxes, which were due March 15th. So the debt limit, of course, was suspended until January 2025, and then it was extended again on March 14th to last until this coming June. In other words, we're going to need to take further action to avoid a default on our debt. Massive pressure on the Congress to get this budget reconciliation package through. That includes raising the debt ceiling. The problem is, from a debt ceiling perspective, the House Republicans are trying to get their Senate counterparts on board with a $4.5 trillion budget resolution that, of course, extends the Trump tax cuts to 2017 TCJA. Also raises the debt ceiling by $4 trillion for 2 years, expected to last 2 years. So that means, by the way, that infers the expectation of $2 trillion deficits in fiscal year 25, fiscal year 26. So they're trying to work through that. What is amazing is that the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the House plan, the one big beautiful bill the president has been promoting, would add, you ready for this, $25 trillion to the debt over the next decade, even without extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The CBO predicts that the debt will hit $52 trillion by 2035. That's hard to fathom. So with the tax cuts, it's $25 trillion, taking us in the that puts us in that range. Another $61 trillion is what it would put us without the tax cuts. It's about $8-9 trillion less, puts us at 52. which hard to believe is another $16 trillion added on. That equals, doing the math there, over 10 years, $1.6 trillion a year in deficits. With the tax cuts, $2.5 trillion in deficits. Now, I'll be honest, the CBO, Rhino, you and I have reviewed this many times. They don't always get it right, do they? So you have to discount their estimates a little bit. But I will say this. I heard Senator Ron Johnson from the great state of Wisconsin in an interview this morning. Now, he's one of the high-ranking senators working on their budget reconciliation package. And this is what concerns me. Not going to touch Medicare. Not going to touch Social Security. He said it this morning. He said we need to return to pre-pandemic spending adjusted for the increase in population and inflation. Okay, I'll buy that. Pre-pandemic spending was about $4.4 trillion. That's hard to believe, just a short 6 years ago. Now it's 7.3. That's what the budget for the next fiscal year is estimated at. Think about that. That is a massive increase. So when you're increasing spending, we increased revenue by 1/3. You're increasing spending by 2/3. Yeah, that's what happens. You end up producing massive deficits because obviously revenues, even though increasing, not keeping up with the meteoric increase in spending. But here's what he said. We got to go back to them and make those adjustments. By the way, we're not touching Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, veterans benefits, debt interest, and we're adding to defense. Okay, well, what are we going to do there, Senator? Because you've relegated us down, reduced this whole discussion down to about 15%. So you're not serious. You've not offered a serious strategy here. It sounds great. And I'm sure the people are lapping up. Yeah, the Senator's right. Let's go back to pre-pandemic and just a little inflation in population adjustment. Except you've already excluded 85% of the budget. It's hands off. You're not serious. Will somebody please be serious about this? And I'm serious in requesting that. I just don't see it at this point. So right now, the agenda is sort of stuck between the House and the Senate, engaged in a little infighting here. Gee, Rhino, what other august lawmaking body does that remind you of? Oh, my gosh. Hint, it ain't far from where we are. So, something else that, boy, really got folks riled up is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick talking about significant changes being made and applied and investigated in the Social Security program, said that only those who were receiving payments fraudulently would speak up if they missed a couple of Social Security benefit. You're saying, you saw that, right? I don't know if that was a smart thing to say there, Mr. Secretary. Only those who were receiving benefits through some fraudulent means would speak up and say, hey, look, what happened to my benefits this month? I think you got that wrong, sir, with all due respect. I think everybody who's on the Social Security benefit payroll, having not received their monthly check or deposit electronically, as is the case with most recipients, would speak up and say, where's my money? I don't know, man. You're not helping our cause there, Mr. Secretary. We're coming right back with more. We've also got Representative Dana McLean and Sandy Middleton on at 12:05 today.
Days with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
back, everyone. It is middays. So there's a lot of folks that have texted in about the superiority, or actually I think it's the supremacy, right, would be the proper term, of state statute versus federal. And I'm sure that gets into some legal weeds, and I freely admit I don't know everything there is to know about that, but you're right. And to my understanding, in general, federal law supersedes that of state.
That's the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
The next step down, a little bit more granular, a state cannot have a more lax law than federal law. A state can be more stringent to a certain extent than federal law, but a state cannot decide, federal law says this, we're going to let that slide. That's where the problem lies.
Makes sense. So at a minimum, you've got to be at the level of whatever federal law
prescribes. If federal law says crime XYZ gets you 10 years, and one state goes, that ain't long enough, give them 20. That's fine. But if federal law goes, crime XYZ gets you 10 years, and a state goes, we're just going to give them a little fine and some community service, that's not okay.
Yeah. On the C Spire text line, somebody objected to our description of the far-left liberal. I guess it's okay if I describe her as such. To my knowledge and just observation and analysis over the last couple of years, the left in this country has leaned so far into this radical gender ideology stuff and refused to acknowledge that it's taken its toll on their party. Big time. When every single Democrat in the Senate votes against a common sense bill that would prevent
dudes in dresses
from competing against girls in sports, what planet are you on? That gets 80% approval, which means it's more than just Republicans. I'd like to meet the 20% that think this is okay, by the way.
I think you would.
Yeah, you're probably
They're
right.
Not nice people.
And this person says, I don't particularly care for someone making fun of another's physical appearance. Stick with policy and character or lose credibility. So I'll respond with this in that I prefaced it with this is totally unusual for me and Rhino to some extent as well. But Rhino made an excellent point when we read your text when we were off the air, which is that this person, everything we talked about.
I started at the top of the picture and went down and described fashion choices and decisions she made that morning to be a walking billboard for toxic and crazy ideas.
Right. So this is different than making fun of a person's natural, God-given physical appearance. No, we didn't do that. I didn't say like they have a big nose or crooked lips or anything else, or talk about their weight or their facial makeup or anything like that. This was all about the crazy colored, unnatural hair, the crazy glasses. I guess you could say that I talked about her bug eyes. And maybe that's natural. Sure does look like to me, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. Looks to me like they're intentionally opening their eyes, like, you know what I'm saying, really big, to make sure you notice that. This is all about getting noticed. Why can't you just be who you are? Now, I don't think God has a problem with us grooming ourselves to take our God-given looks and make us all look as attractive as we can. I don't think there's a problem with that. But this was all intentional. I'm going to get these crazy glasses and crazy hair and crazy earrings. I'm going to do everything I can to just look crazy, just like you said. So you'll notice me. And by the way, I think we ought to be able to mutilate children's genitals, which further confirms you're freaking crazy. What'd I miss there? Okay. Ran over. Deborah in Corinth says, have y'all ever heard of the year of Jubilee in the Bible when every 7 years maybe all debt is erased and everyone starts over? I haven't, Deborah. I wouldn't favor that. If I either owed a third party or a third party owed me, I don't want to just forgive that debt every 7 years. You entered into a legal binding contract and you owe money. I guess that's what you're talking about, if I misunderstood you.
I don't think it's every 7 years. I think there's something else in there.
Well,
it's one of those biblical turns of phrase that is rarely, if ever, used. Not like, I don't know why a week of Sundays or a month of Sundays is coming to mind, because that's not it. But there's something about Jubilee that's tickling my brain, like months of years or weeks of years or some way to calculate time. And it's not 7 years, it's like 7 times 7 or something like that.
Well, I don't know exactly what that means, but I support the rule of law, and the law says when you sign a legal binding contract that you owe money, you pay it back. And if you don't, you suffer the legal consequences of defaulting on that debt. Simple. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have a functioning economy, by the way. We'd all be dirt poor broke. We're stepping aside for Fox News and SuperTalk News. When we come back in the Element Wealth studio, it's Robert Dozier, Executive Director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Robert Dozier, Executive Director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association. Robert, always good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Always good to see you. Good morning.
Yeah, so I don't know that in years past, in all of our discussions here about this particular issue, that being pharmacy benefit managers, a.k.a. PBMs, that we've seen so much attention.
Well, we've recently seen attention in the last 2 weeks. We've seen very little attention all session long, but here in the last 2 weeks, since the House Bill 1123 came out of the Senate, off the Senate floor, now all of a sudden, the sky is falling and the scare tactics are coming in, and one thing after another. So that's the new attention that we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Is this thing going to get through? I've seen lots of arguments on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments on both sides. The House Bill 1123 was just sent to conference on the House floor just a while ago. Representative Hank Zuber sent the bill, or the House did as a whole, or what have you, to the conference committee. So now to go to a conference committee, our position was we did not want to go to a conference committee. We wanted the House to concur, send the bill to the governor, because the Senate passed the bill out of the Senate, basically with language that we were under the impression that the House was going to concur in. There was some negotiations with Ha Bryan and some others from the pharmacy side with the House, and we were under the impression that if the proposed language passed the Senate, it would go to the House and then concur. And then all of a sudden, like you're talking about, the sky starts falling, the fear tactics start coming in. There's always the one that always it never ceases to amaze me. This is going to raise costs. It's going to raise costs. It's going to raise costs. Well, they never tell you or show you how it's going to raise cost.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, the primary goal of this legislation is just to increase transparency in the process, right?
As the language was when it came out of the Senate, it is to provide transparency and also some PBM reform. We were not setting our reimbursement or anything like that, changing our reimbursement methodology like you and I have talked about before with the NADAC methodology. The pharmacy community had already made concession on that. They took that out. That was one of our biggest part, if not our biggest part. So the other things were to tighten up loopholes in the current statute institute and to also expand on transparency and reform. And the PBMs have always done a great job of doing scare tactics with the employer groups and the businesses, not only in Mississippi, but across the country and on the national level. And they always use the scare tactic of this is going to drive cost up, this is going to increase premiums and everything else. People have to remember, the PBMs are the ones that set the premiums. The PBMs are the ones that set the copays. The PBMs are the ones that set the reimbursement back to the pharmacies. We're not setting our own reimbursement. So what we're saying is, hey, let's just put some sunlight out there and let's tighten up some of these loopholes and have some more reform and everything else. The people that I represent are independent pharmacists. Independent pharmacists are small business owners on one side, but they're also healthcare professionals on the other. These guys see what goes on across the state of Mississippi all the time. They're never going to agree to introduce legislation that would raise cost on their patients. That's not what this is about. But all of this chatter that we've had here in the past 2 weeks is nothing but scare tactics and fear-mongering.
Well, so what are the expectations in terms of the results that would be achieved here should this legislation become law, both for the independent pharmacists and patients?
Well, for the independent pharmacists, it'd be kind of a more of a playing field, a level playing field. Now, is it going to be perfect? Is it going to help them with their bottom line? No, because I just told you a while ago, we took out the biggest part, our biggest ask, the NADAC part. That would have changed our reimbursement methodology, kind of like the Division of Medicaid did back in 2017, and it saved the state of Mississippi $55 million annually. All right, so it's going to, like I said, do transparency and reform. Now, the end goal right here is to help the patient. The patients in this state right now are being steered by the PBMs and the insurance companies to basically preferred pharmacies that are out there. Well, these preferred pharmacies are affiliate pharmacies that are owned by the PBMs, the PBM mail orders, the PBM retail pharmacies, and such like that. So we live in a rural state. Some of these patients might have to drive, 30 miles one way to this pharmacy that they're being forced to. We don't think the patient needs to be forced to go to that pharmacy. Let the patient choose. And so those are some of the things, the steering aspect that we were trying to tighten up, and one thing after another. Also, on the appeals process, we're trying to tighten that up a little bit. That language, the appeals language, has been on the books for probably about 4 or 5 years already, and so has the steering language. It's been on the books for 4 or 5 years right now.
So one of the provisions, as I understand it, Robert, is that the PBMs would have to charge insurers the same amount, right, that they pay the pharmacists. Is that correct? So they're in the middle, right, of the insurers, the big insurers and the pharmacies.
I think you're talking about the PBM would have to pay the pharmacy, the independent pharmacy, the same as they would their affiliate pharmacy.
I see.
That means like, let's take CVS Caremark for an example.
Okay.
CVS Caremark is a PBM, but they are also in the retail pharmacy, and they also own a specialty pharmacy and mail order pharmacy.
Okay. And
so Caremark, being the PBM, when they reimburse the independent pharmacy, if they reimburse them $10, well, it has to be the same as their independent their affiliate pharmacy. So if they reimburse their mail order company or their affiliate pharmacy, the brick and mortar, $10, they got to do the same as the independent.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's been on the books. That's been on the books for quite a while too.
Okay. Well, is the problem, when just thinking through that scenario, is the problem here that the PBMs who are reimbursing the independent pharmacies are also competitors?
That's correct.
To some extent.
And here, let me just break it down real easy. It's kind of like McDonald's telling Burger King how much to charge for the Whopper, okay? You have your competitor out there who is dictating the terms back to you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Board of Pharmacy here in the state, they did an audit on Optum RX. And I think it's a pretty thorough audit from what I've heard. I haven't seen the audit or anything like that. But the Board of Pharmacy, they released like a 2-page executive summary. And in that executive summary, the board states that Optum was reimbursing their affiliate pharmacies, their own pharmacies, way more than they were the independent pharmacies and some chain drugstores.
I got you.
Now, that's kind of turned into a legal issue between the Board of Pharmacy and Optum RX. They're kind of in court with that right there. But, that 2-page executive summary was, I think it's still on the Board of Pharmacy website, and you can go and pull it up and look at it. And if you see that 2-page executive summary, that's about all I know and all I can tell you. But the board did state that they have seen cases where Optum is paying their affiliate pharmacy way more than they're paying the independent pharmacies.
Okay, gotcha. So where do you think this legislation is headed at this point?
I don't know. We had some conversations yesterday, and at the end of the day, of all of the proposed changes, our association could not agree to any of the proposed changes, and so our message was to concur with the Senate amendments and send the bill to Governor Tate Reeves. But now the bill is going to conference committee. So right now, I don't know what it's going to look like.
Well, if you want to hang around and keep talking about this, I'm still curious about how this transparency requirement is going to work that's included in the legislation as well.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, we got Robert Dozier. He is the executive director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association. We're in the Element Well studio, coming right back.
Pick up the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back in the Element Well studio. Here's the text for you, Robert. This is Taylor Jones. Me and my wife, Fair Pender Jones, own an independent pharmacy in Grenada, Mississippi. She could explain everything the politicians won't say. It's all about big money, PBMs, and lobbyists getting paid millions. And I hear you, Taylor. I do, and I appreciate your conundrum and concern. I'll just say this. I don't have a problem with anybody pursuing profit. I mean, I don't have a problem with lobbyists getting paid for lobbying. I mean, that's legal in our country, and it should be. It's free market.
You and I have had this conversation multiple times before, on the air and off the air, about the free market in healthcare. There is no free market
and I'm with
in
you
healthcare.
On that. I'm with you.
And so when you've got a pharmacy benefit manager or a insurance company throwing the contract down in front of a independent pharmacy, and saying, "Hey, take it or leave it. This is it." There's no negotiating, none whatsoever. What are we looking at with the two big chains right now, Walgreens and Rite Aid? Rite Aid just came out of bankruptcy court. Why is Rite Aid having problems? Because they are not affiliated with a PBM.
No doubt.
Look at Walgreens. Walgreens is a 100-year-old company. They just sold to a private equity firm. Why is that?
And closing a bunch of stores.
closing a lot of stores, thousands. Why is that? They are not associated or affiliated with a PBM.
Yeah.
Just like the independents. The Board of Pharmacy, they've got a site or something on their website that shows the number of pharmacies that have closed over the past 4 years. It's about, on average, it's a little more than 20 pharmacies across the state that are closing. Now, listen to this. Not only is an independent pharmacy or a pharmacy in general closing, that is a healthcare facility that our state dearly needs, but we're also losing a business in this deal right
and the
here.
employees and associated with it, and vendors that serve those companies as well.
Look, I've been a free market. I've been a capitalist guy my entire life. I think that is the great thing about the country we live in. But at the end of the day, there is no free market in the healthcare system. I don't care if you're on the hospital side, the physician, the nurses, dental, pharmacy, or what.
Yeah, and to your point, I rarely talk to anybody, no matter what their role is and position is in the industry, that's happy with it, with our system.
Yeah.
And what makes it, I think, particularly complicated, to your point about there being no free market in healthcare, is that you're not being paid for the most part by the end user. You're being paid by a third party.
That's correct.
And when you got a third party involved, that just massively complicates things.
Yeah, how do you go from a two-party system to a three-party system and save money? You don't. You're going to incur costs somewhere, and somebody's going to get shorted. It's like I've always said, the PBM sits in the middle.
Yeah.
The business community, their premiums and costs are steadily going up year after year. That's a proven fact.
No doubt.
The patient and / beneficiary, their costs are always going up. That's proven. The pharmacy's reimbursement is always going down. That's proven. Well, what's the common denominator there? The PBM, the insurance company, because they're the ones that set all of the premiums, the copays, and the reimbursements and everything. They're in control. The PBM market only benefits the PBM market.
Yeah. And I think there's some truth to that. And to Taylor, your point about lobbyists, Robert and I see each other in the Capitol quite a bit.
That's right.
And it is full of lobbyists. I mean, but they serve an important role in the lawmaking process. I mean, how much time do you spend just educating lawmakers about these issues?
That's true. That's true. A lot. And it's a very complicated issue. Look, we can sit here and say good things about lobbyists. We can sit here and say bad things about lobbyists, like we can radio hosts.
Yeah, sure. Might as well join in. But they are generally speaking, they're highly compensated because they have a lot of influence, and I'm not going to deny or discount that, but I think it's a little unfair to characterize lobbyists as just bad people because they get paid to sit between people who want certain policy and people who make them.
We can sit here and talk about lawyers being bad.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to say that whenever you need one.
Exactly right. So they serve a valuable role in the process, and in general, it can be a job that comes with a fairly high level of compensation because it's difficult work, and it requires someone with unique skill set and talents to do that. You hear this all the time down there at the Capitol. Yeah, I really like those particular lobbyists, or I don't like those particular lobbyists. And likability, like it or not, no pun intended, does figure in quite a bit to the way they vote on certain issues. There's no doubt.
That goes to the old saying, it's a lot easier to attract flies with honey than it is vinegar.
Right. So, okay, well, it looks like maybe you got some traction going here. What do your members think about this bill?
Well,
I'm hearing that they feel like it stops short, Robert, of what you need.
You're talking about my independent pharmacists?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the big thing that we had to give up on the front end at the beginning of the session was the NADAC part.
Okay.
That's the reimbursement methodology that the Division of Medicaid went to, and that saves $55 million annually. And those are the Medicaid numbers. They're not Robert Dozier's numbers.
Yeah, I got you.
So anyway, yes, it does kind of fall a little short right here because we had to give up our big ask.
Okay.
And
I
now,
got you.
so now we're looking at reform and transparency and such like that. And now that we're getting the traction, or we had the traction, and we're going to, it came out of the Senate. We liked the bill and everything. We were under the impression the House was going to concur.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, today we hear that the House has sent the bill to conference. And we're a little disappointed on that. Our message was we wanted to concur with the Senate amendments and hopefully send the bill to Governor Reeves.
Yeah, gotcha. So let's talk about this transparency requirement. How would that work in practice?
Well, transparency, and I don't know exactly which one you're exactly talking about, but transparency in general has
Rebates. Talk about that.
Okay, so in that aspect right there, the PBMs, they collect rebates back from the drug manufacturers. Okay, the drug manufacturers have to pay these rebates to the PBMs to get on these formularies and such like this. And it's kind of a pay-to-play deal. Well, for years, the PBMs they did not want to disclose these rebates and everything else like that. Well, there's language in the bill that says that the PBM has to disclose 100% of the rebates back to the employers. Okay. That's all great and everything, but there's some issue with that it's only talking about the aggregate. Okay, and you're very smart numbers man. When you're talking about the aggregate, you're not talking about the real number. You got to get down to the real number right here.
Yeah,
and there is information that just came out recently from the West Virginia Commissioner of Insurance. West Virginia went a step further and said, hey, you need to pass on the rebate, not disclose it, but pass on the rebate to basically the end user, the patient. And guess what? Over years, it has shown that those premiums have gone down.
Okay.
So that is one example of transparency or PBM reform being able to work to lower premiums and costs to the end user, the patient. And that goes against what the PBMs have always been saying. Any type of transparency or any type of PBM reform is going to raise cost. And that is the furthest thing from the truth.
Gotcha. On the C Spire text line, rebate equal kickback. That's not necessarily true. There are a bunch of industries that utilize rebates as incentives to their partners, their business partners.
What I say a rebate is, or a refund is, it's an overpayment. You're paying too much on the front end, and you might get that money on the back end.
Yeah.
But that other entity, they have used your money for a certain period of time.
Agreed.
And basically put it in an interest-bearing account. And if you really want to get to the truth about the high cost of prescription drugs, you've got to get to a transparent cost number. And at this point in time, NADAC is the best benchmark that's out there. And so it's cost, and it's a transparent number. And like I said, that was our big ask this year in this bill, and we had to take it out. So, we're kind of like, well, where do we go from here in conference?
Well, transparency in healthcare, from a pricing perspective, is a huge problem, not just with pharmaceuticals.
No, 100%. And you get a hospital bill out there, and you start looking at cost on your hospital bill just for a one-night stay, and you can't figure it out.
Yeah, you can't. Nor can you figure out who do you owe what and how much you owe them.
100%.
Which is something that needs to be addressed in healthcare in general. But I get what the texter's saying here, that in this case, it does kind of appear to be sort of an after-the-fact remuneration that should have been handled on the front end.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Robert Dozier, Executive Director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association, has been our guest. Always good to see you. Thanks for coming in,
always good to see you, my friend.
Appreciate
Look forward to it again.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to nag me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. Wednesday just don't go. Thursday goes too slow. I'll have Friday on my mind. Gonna have fun in the city.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio looking at Tesla today. It's had a pretty good run even after Tim Walz was like wishing for the value of the stock to plummet because they don't like Elon Musk. It was up considerably yesterday, and today it has given up much of its gain down to $14. It's $14 today, down to $2.73. I saw an analyst that put like a $2,500 a share price target on it in 18 months, which seems pretty crazy. And this is a reputable analyst, and they're betting on...
Somebody put something in their coffee this morning?
I don't know, but it's not just EVs, of course, because this is a conglomerate. Elon Musk and team are into a lot of different lines of business. But something they're working on, you're probably aware of this. Not sure how many folks in our audience are, is that a new generation of Tesla vehicles will be introduced that will allow the owners of the vehicles to make them available for ride-sharing services, that they would be equipped with all the various technology necessary to do that, and they're totally autonomous. So when we get to the point where all the technology exists for reliable, secure, safe, autonomous vehicles, you could actually turn your personal vehicle into a revenue-generating asset. That's kind of fascinating concept to think about. But that's what Tesla's working on, and this analyst thinks that's going to be huge, that they're way ahead of everybody else in this regard with this new technology. I've often thought that we may get to a point eventually with the evolution and the mainstreaming of autonomous vehicles, and that's going to take a while as we build out the necessary infrastructure and technology across the country. But start with the larger metropolitan areas. It's typically where stuff like this would start, and then spread to the less dense populated areas, the more sparsely populated areas. You would have the technology, and autonomous vehicles could become practical. Now, that's probably, in terms of any reasonable numbers, 15, 20 years away, arguably. Now, that's a complete
For
guess.
daily use.
Yeah, right. Just regular, normal, everyday type commute use.
You've pretty much already got it available for use on any highway or interstate.
That's exactly right. I mean, even mine with the Super Cruise, my 23 model vehicle, pretty close to that, though you got to keep your eyes on the road. It's got a monitoring system, and if you don't, it starts yelling at you. Put your hands on the wheel, and that's fine. So that's kind of an entry-level sort of form of it. But this is what Elon Musk and company are working on. Would anybody doubt their ability to achieve this innovation? I wouldn't. But I think we may get to a point, I know this is far-fetched, and it's radical, it's a long time out, to a point where it will be illegal for humans to drive vehicles in this country.
I don't think we'll get that far.
I actually do. I don't know when that time may come.
I just don't see it being a rational extension of governance for a country this large.
Well, that's possible, and I see your point there, and I certainly respect and appreciate that.
Like if we were in, say, the UK,
yeah,
where most of it has been urbanized to a certain extent, even the countryside has paved roads.
True.
I might could see that, but in a country where there are thousands of miles of dirt and gravel roads, I just don't see it.
Well, how about certain areas restricted to only AVs.
Oh, yeah. In major
Yes.
metropolitan areas, I could see it happening within the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And we will get to a point, the lines will cross next 20 years where the number of AVs versus the number of human control vehicles pretty equal, about half and half. Tesla is betting the whole dang company on that tech. You know that, on that technology. And there are a lot of, think about it, commercial enterprises who are chomping at the bit for this, right? Because
they've got their, the Power Wall. That's another one of their products that they've got. The third one came out last year, Powerwall 3. And yeah, they've innovated and iterated on it, but doesn't seem like they've put near the amount of resources towards that as they have towards their EVs.
Agree. But all this is kind of neat. We'll all benefit in some way, somehow, from all the work on this innovation, because it always leads to things they didn't even think about, that, wow, this is a byproduct of this effort. That happens all the time, and we'll benefit this constant pursuit of new technologies and innovation, something you never hear the left talk about, because it doesn't fit in with their ideals of climate change and radical gender ideology and race. It just doesn't fit the narrative very well. But lots of stuff happening in that world. The president issued an order not long after he was sworn into office that basically bans all this DEI crap across the spectrum of federal agencies. We were talking earlier about, hey, what if the states just ignore federal law, federal decree? In this case, an agency ignores an executive order. Turns out it's the old National Institutes of Health. Still got $1 billion going into DEI programs, from race-based hiring to this nonsensical anti-racist training and diversity-first faculty pipelines as well. Meaning, if you check the various physical characteristics boxes, we're going to hire you, or sexual orientation, which isn't a physical characteristic, you have a better chance of getting hired than a person who's more qualified who doesn't fit those criteria. So this is still going on. Can you believe this, Rhino? $1 billion a year spent on this garbage. To produce what? Worse outcomes is what it produces, because you're not hiring the best and brightest. It ain't that hard to dang figure out. It's just incredible. It is kind of refreshing to see lots of universities starting to dial back lots of the craziness, because the president said we're not sending you any federal money if you could continue to engage. We were talking earlier, we may be running short of time, have to catch it in the next segment, about voting and the new executive order requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote as well. And there are literally some people in this country on the left who think that just merely requiring someone to substantiate who they are is actually racist. We'll save it till the next segment. We'll get that clip to you. But that's the way the left in this country thinks, that's for sure. The Department of Education, it's another one that's looks like it's in the process of being dismantled. This is what you'll get from Trump administration officials such as Secretary of Education Linda McMahon. You see, she's serving because she wants to help. She doesn't need the money. She doesn't need the spoils. She doesn't need all the other ancillary benefits associated with being a U.S. cabinet secretary. And so she's cool with the idea of her agency, the one she runs, going vamoose. She's cool with that. How refreshing is that to see someone at such a high level in government not be working feverishly to protect their little kingdoms, their little fiefdoms? The typical career bureaucrat that imposes all kinds of crazy stuff on your life? You never see them do that. If anything, just the opposite. They'd be trying to explain to everybody why the world is going to end if they don't keep their job and their agency. The same thing with this controversy that's popped up over the last couple of days with the Atlantic editor being part of a text conversation using the tool Signal that involved several high-level officials in the Trump administration, including National Security Advisor Tim Walz.
Who'd have thunk it? Jeff Goldberg lied again.
It's all about that. I mean, it's all they're looking for is to score political
points. Wasn't a lick of confidential anything in it.
Here's what I was going to say, though. I just can't tell you how heartened I was to see Tim Walz came out this morning and said, it's me. It's my fault. I blew it. I made a mistake. What do you mean, accepting personal responsibility and not pointing fingers at others? When's the last time you saw that? When did you ever see that during the Biden years? Ever. It's always somebody else, always pointing fingers. He pointed it right at him, stood up and accepted responsibility and culpability like good leaders do. And by the way, he said, here's what we're going to do to fix it. Make sure it doesn't happen again.
Mike
Coming right
Waltz.
back. Nick, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Patriot.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
I got rice cooking in the microwave. Got a 3-day beard I don't plan to shave. And it's a goofy thing, but I just gotta say, hey, I'm a-doing alright. Yeah.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Yeah, my apologies. I made an error. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, formerly a representative from the great state of Florida. Also, I believe was a Navy SEAL, if I'm not mistaken. Rhino, I think he had a rather storied military career. So I apologize for that. Freudian slip, I guess. I did a Newsmax interview a couple of days ago. And
he was a Ranger in Green Beret.
Okay, thank you. I knew it was something high level. I called him a SEAL, but he was a Ranger, the kind of the Army equivalent for Special Forces, right? Really the creme de la creme, as they say. And the interview I did, one of the questions they asked is whether or not Tim Walz, and Mike is Mike Waltz, and Tim is Tim Walz. I got that right?
He actually retired from the Army Special Forces at the rank of colonel to take the job as National Security Advisor under President Trump.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So, yeah, I think he's a perfect choice. And I was just saying in the last segment how refreshing it is to see somebody at such a high level say, hey, mea culpa. I'm responsible. I'm going to fix it. That's the way it should be. It's what good leaders do. We're all subject to making errors. The real test of a quality human or company, it's not whether or not they ever make a mistake. It's what they do, how they react when they do commit errors. And if you're in the camp that says, I've never made a mistake, and anytime I do, it's your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. Well, you suck as a leader. I'll just put it that way. I like people who stand up now. You know what we say, to err is human. It's what I used to tell my kids, I think, playing baseball. But to make the same mistake twice is stupid. I don't think it'll happen again, honestly. I think measures will be taken to prevent and avoid that. But it is refreshing to see someone stand up and be a leader here.
Well, it won't happen again because they won't have this timetable where they can have this happen and then have it leak out the day before the meetings were already scheduled with the people they wanted to talk to it about.
Completely agree. The news,
almost like it was coordinated.
I have that same concern. The Newsmax interviewer asked me if I thought that the Democrat Party was trying to change their image and appeal more to young people who seem to these days be gravitating more towards the Republican Party and conservatives and like the more macho, manly, type A personality. If Tim Walz, as a Democrat, high-level Democrat, thought to possibly be a candidate for president in 28, representing the Democrats, was going to be influential in changing the image of the Democrat Party, and I said, well, there's a reason they call him Tampon Tim. You know, no, he doesn't really project type A masculinity whatsoever, does he?
Wait, you're saying jazz hands isn't masculine?
So weird, man. It's so weird. All right, do we have time to play this clip here?
Oh, yeah. I don't know that anybody wants to hear from this loon, but here he is, the illustriously idiotic Ellie Mistel.
Okay, so like what?
Well, we could eliminate all voter registration laws. See, when Democrats get in charge, we try to protect voting rights. We don't make voting easier. Now, I'm all for voter eligibility requirements. We might disagree about what those requirements should be, but I'm going to say that there should be an age limit to vote. I might say 16, you might say 18, but I'm not going to say 8, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to agree that there should be voter eligibility requirements. But once you're eligible, why do you have to pre-register? Why is that even a thing? It wasn't a thing in this country at the founding. We didn't have voter pre-registration in 1787. We didn't have voter pre-registration in 1821. We only started having voter registration, generally speaking, after the Civil War. Why do you think that is? It's because a bunch of freed African slaves were migrating up north, and all of a sudden New York was like, we need some registration up in here, right? A bunch of immigrants from Europe, mainly Ireland and Italy, were coming to New York. People were like, oh, we need some registration in here. If you're eligible to vote, you should be automatically registered to vote, and that is how they do it everywhere else but us. Everywhere else but us either has automatic registration or some other form of forced registration for everybody, so that you don't have this disconnect between eligible voters and registered voters. That's the first law in the book that we could change. And it's to see how that's different than just saying we have to protect voting rights. No. We don't have to protect voting rights. We have to expand voting rights so that the 90 million people that sat on the couch and sat out this last election between democracy and fascism, so that maybe they have a little bit of an easier time to get up off the couch and come participate in the democracy.
Where do you even start with this lunacy as you described it? See, here's what I would say to that. This wouldn't be required. I'd love to not have to require this. If there weren't so many people that were hell-bent on defrauding the system for personal gain, like you, like that dude. That's the problem. You're right. We wouldn't have to deal with all the hassles, all the controls. We wouldn't need police officers if people didn't break the law. We wouldn't need law enforcement. But unfortunately, people do. They're bad people. We wouldn't need a military to protect bad people from blowing us up if bad people didn't want to blow us up. I mean, it's just stupid what the guy's saying there. Just totally stupid. It ignores reality. Of course, isn't that pretty much par for the course?
Welcome to La La Land, the only place Democrats reside.
Coming right back with Representative Dana McLean and Sandy Middleton after Fox News and SuperTalk News.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
We're pleased to welcome now Representative Dana McLean, represents Mississippi House District 39, which includes Lowndes and Monroe counties, and also Sandy Middleton, Executive Director of the Center for Violence Prevention. Ladies, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so we wanted to talk today about some legislation that you're working on concerning rape kits and making those available in emergency rooms. Is that correct?
Correct.
Representative McLean? All right,
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, earlier in the session, I filed House Bill 928, and what that does, it actually mandates that hospitals do what they're supposed to do, which is treat and perform a rape kit on any sexual assault victim that presents to an ER. So the bill actually mandates that they have a supply of rape kits. They have a medical person on hand that can perform the kit, and that they do not turn any victim away. That's basically it.
Sandy, why would a hospital's ER not have rape kits available?
Well, that was our question from the very beginning, and it just became more apparent to us. And as you know, we cover the state for human trafficking, and human trafficking, sexual assault, are very closely akin. And we just had multiple occasions where rape victims were just told, "We don't do that here. We don't do that here," or if we pushed them and said, "Well, your hospital ER, it's an EMTALA violation if you don't do that, if you don't offer them care."
Sure.
And then they would say, "Well, we don't have a kit, and if you'll go up to Memphis, maybe they can do it for you. There's apparently a place up there that does it in house." And so, we even had one situation where a victim didn't even have transportation, and it was during a storm, and she was advised to travel to Memphis, and so she went to 2 other hospitals and got turned away 2 other places, and it's so unfair to a victim of sexual assault who not only needs to have the opportunity to have a forensic medical kit done, but that's a violent attack. Many times there are injuries. Testing needs to occur. Was her attacker? Did they have HIV? Was there some sort of sexually transmitted disease there? And so it's more than just the rape kit. It's the whole package that these victims are being turned away.
So, Representative McLean, why would a hospital, why are they so reluctant to conduct these tests?
I really would like to know why.
Well, is this an expense associated with this? Would they be responsible for funding the kits and paying for them out of their pocket?
They would not. They are actually reimbursed by the Attorney General's office.
For the kit?
Yes.
What about the
services?
For
the procedure.
For the procedure?
Yes,
the
absolutely.
AG reimburses them?
The office, actually, Sandy can speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, so the federal money provides victim compensation funds to our state, and the Attorney General's office handles that fund.
Gotcha.
And so they have it in their administrative rule that they'll pay up to $1,000.
Okay.
And then also other insurance comes into play. If they have to have additional testing or treatment, then if the person has another insurance or Medicare, Medicaid, or something, then that could also come into play. But yes, they shouldn't bear any expense from performing the medical forensic kit.
Representative McLean, is the goal here to confirm that, in fact, a victim, a patient, was raped, and then to try to perhaps gain some more information that could be used to find the perpetrator here?
Well, this is the only way, Gerard, that we'll be able to do that. The first step is to have the evidence against an attacker.
Okay.
And if a victim is not able to obtain a rape kit, that attacker goes free. And so to attack or violate someone again, and we know that has happened, a few years ago, where the mother that was out running in Memphis was killed and sexually assaulted by a rapist that had raped someone previously. They had the rape kit, a year-old rape kit that had never been processed. So step one is to make sure that we have the forensic evidence to prosecute. So this is just a minimum we're asking for. We're just asking for them to have the supply, perform the kit, and don't turn a victim away.
So, Sandy, is there a time element associated with this? Does the test need to be conducted within a certain amount of time post a rape?
Yes.
To determine.
Right. Yes, it's 90. They just changed it to, I believe, 96 hours from the time of the attack. So yes, time is definitely an element. And of course, every time the victim goes to the bathroom or changes clothes or anything, you're losing DNA evidence.
I got you.
And so it's critical that it happens immediately. And the thing is that we've leaned on law enforcement to do their part, and people have beat up law enforcement. They didn't do what they needed to do, blah blah blah. Well, now we're actually in a situation where law enforcement is just as frustrated as we are because they're transporting these victims to hospitals they're transporting them and they're leaning in saying, we need this kit done. Let me go get you a kit, because we want that evidence too to be able to prosecute this person. And that breakdown is just continuing to happen in hospitals. So, and I do want to say, Gerard, we have like 5 SANEs that work for us at the Center for Violence Prevention, and we have memorandums of understanding with all of the Jackson hospitals except UMC. And so, they love the collaborative effort that we have, and they're excited about it, and it just has worked beautifully. And, I don't know if some of these hospitals need to try to find that collaborative person, a nonprofit that can also offer SANEs or what the answer is. But honestly, it's not that hard. I mean, any RN can do the kit.
Okay.
Anybody. It's a bunch of swabs for the most part.
Representative McLean, would the patient have to provide permission to conduct the test under this bill?
Well, we have not put any language regarding, what the victim requests or requires, but if they present and don't want a rape kit, that's their prerogative.
Okay.
That's their right. They don't have to have a rape kit done.
Sure.
But I would think they're at the hospital for treatment. They've been sexually assaulted. Law enforcement has brought them there. That's the purpose. But they're not going to force them to undergo a rape kit if that's not what they want.
I mean, just like any other medical test, you have to sign off and approve that. Yeah.
Sure.
And this would work the same way. But I just wondered if there are any situations where a victim may say, no, I don't really want to do that.
Yes, they are. And actually, with the follow-up that Representative McLean worked on a couple of years ago in the legislation about the crime lab and all of that, the intent is to create an anonymous reporting system so that a victim can come in and say, I'm not sure if I want to cooperate. I'm not sure if I want to, participate in the prosecution, but I do want my kit to be performed so I can think about it and make up my mind. And then that gives the victim the prerogative to go home, talk to family, think about it and decide later on, do I want to participate or do I just want to end it now?
Okay, so you conduct the test, and if they decide to move forward, you've got the evidence you need to do so.
Correct.
So that would mean then that the hospital would not furnish that information to law enforcement without the consent of the victim?
Well, the way that would work is there would be a tracking number. There's a barcode and a tracking number. There's no name or anything on the kit.
Gotcha.
So there's just a number that identifies that kit to that person.
Tell us what's happening now, Dana. Do we have situations now where, because there's no rape kit available, a victim of sexual assault presents, as you say, to the ER, and they say, look, I was raped, and they maintain they were raped, and there's no test done, and then it just dies at that point?
That's exactly what has happened. And it has happened all over the state. It's happened in various areas of the state where they have been told, we don't perform kits here, we don't have kits, go to a different hospital. And as Sandy mentioned, we had a victim of human trafficking back in January during the ice storm up in North Mississippi, and she went to 3 different places. She sat at one ER for 8 hours and was eventually told, we don't have any kits here. So if you can imagine what that feels like for that victim to be traumatized over and over again.
Yeah, it just worsens, exacerbates the situation. If you ladies can hang around, we can continue the discussion on the other side of the break. Got Representative Dana McLean and Sandy Middleton in the Element Well studio. We're coming right back.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Hadn't heard that one in a while. That's the great David Bowie with Ziggy Stardust. We are back in the Element Well studio with Representative Dana McLean and Sandy Middleton, who's the Executive Director of the Center for Violence Prevention. We're talking about this legislation that would ensure that rape kits are used in emergency rooms in a timely manner when a patient victim presents to the ER that has just experienced sexual assault. So, Representative McLean, what's the status of the legislation here?
Well, my bill, which was HB 928, passed unanimously in the House. It came through the Public Health Committee and passed through the committee and, like I said, passed unanimously on the floor. It went over to the Senate and didn't come out of the Public Health Committee to be voted.
Didn't come out of committee?
Nope.
Senator Hobb Bryan, of course, who chairs the Health Committee in the Mississippi State Senate.
Correct.
So
what I was able to do is was also involved in the Attorney General's office has a bill in the Senate that added additional rights to a sexual assault victim's Bill of Rights. So that bill, which is SB 2211, came over to the House, and I amended that bill on the floor to add the language from 928 with the support of the Attorney General's office. As you know, her office is very concerned with human trafficking, sexual assault, and so that is a Judd B. bill now, and so it is going to conference.
Who's chair over there in the Senate on Judd B?
That's Joey Fillingame.
Okay. So did Senator Bryan or anybody on the Public Health Committee, did they advise you why they couldn't support the legislation?
They have not told me. I presented the bill to the chairman and didn't really get a response as to how he would move forward or whether he would on the bill. So I don't know.
And we attempted to meet with him as well.
And he just didn't want to meet with you?
Apparently.
Didn't accept the invitation, shall we say?
Yeah, he didn't let us through the door.
Okay. Wow, that's kind of amazing here. So, did you happen to, Representative McLean, did you happen to view the committee meeting when the bill was taken up? Did it get taken up?
No, it did not.
Okay.
It was
So
not even on the agenda. Right.
I have a problem with that, I got to tell you, and that's not anything that we're going to solve today. It's something I've talked about here on the show, that committee chairpersons, I think, have way too much power in that regard, where they're not required to put a bill up for the committee. I've also attended a number of committee meetings just as an observer there. Of course, you have to be. You're not, unless you're invited to speak and recognized to speak. But when they call for votes, and it's all in favor say aye, and nobody says a word, and then the chairman says, the ayes have it. So why can't we get, I know it's another day, another discussion, and for other people, but I think we should have, honestly, a record of how folks vote in committee. And I've talked to committee chairman about, why'd you dispense with this bill? I don't even remember that one. Okay, great. So we got some work to do, I believe, in the lawmaking process. But back to this issue, might there be some concerns of Sandy on the part of the hospitals operating the emergency room and, of course, other medical personnel that might be involved here that they just don't want to get involved and that they may be called in to participate in the legal process here?
Sure, and we understand that, and but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't do the right thing.
Sure.
And ultimately, that's what this is about, is let's just do the right thing. I mean, we spend so much time in our judiciary committees and whatnot talking about the rights of the offender, and this is just a small thing we can do for a victim. But yes, to answer your question, I think some nurses are afraid that they'll have to come testify, but the reality, I've got all these sane nurses that work for me, and I think altogether they've only had to go testify 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
And because the reality is that when you have DNA evidence, then most times they just plead out. It never goes to trial. They just plead out because what do you say? You got to you've pretty much got a locked up case.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I don't know that there's any value a medical person a healthcare worker could add to that.
And more or less, they just have to confirm that they did do the test.
Yeah.
And somebody from the crime lab may have to come testify and talk a little bit more about their methods and all of that. But basically, the sane nurse is just going to say, yes, that's my kid, and yes, I did it, and it's not that big of a deal, really.
Speaking of crime lab, Dana, are you satisfied with the crime lab? I've heard, the last couple of years that there needed to be some improvement there.
Right, and we set up a task force 2 years ago. We actually put protocols in place regarding rape kits, and because there were none. A rape kit could sit in a hospital refrigerator for years, which has happened in the past. So we knew there were backlogs of rape kits all over the state. So with this other legislation that we put together, they have 24 hours for law enforcement to come and pick up that kit.
Okay.
So, and then law enforcement has 7 days to get it to the crime lab. And then it goes on with additional procedures and protocols, time limits for that. And we developed a task force and had lots of members from lots of different agencies, law enforcement, hospital association, although we didn't really have a member there on the task force from the hospital association. But we actually we're trying to fill in the gaps on what else do we need to do. And we found a great vendor that could process send those kits with a barcode, so those victims could now track their kit. They can log in confidentially and put in the barcode number and find out, where is my kit during this whole procedure? Is it still at the crime lab? What's going on with my case? So, but that's why this legislation is also important, because it fills in one of the gaps that we found out. What good does it do to have a 24-hour time limit to pick up the kit, a 7-day time limit to get it to the crime lab, and so forth, if you can't even get the rape kit done in the first place? So, this is so important, and it really is. And we, like Sandy said, we just need to do the right thing. Hospitals need to do the right thing, and we just need to protect victims.
So are there any consequences under this legislation for a hospital that doesn't conform, doesn't have the rape kits, doesn't conduct the test?
We're going to come on SuperTalk and talk about them.
That'll do it.
Or maybe do a press conference in front of the building. We could do that too. No, but and to add on to what Dana said, I think that these are repeat offenders. The rapists, we know typically they have committed multiple violent crimes, and it's good for society. It's not only good for victims, but it's good for society to take these people off the street.
Sure.
And I mean, Mississippi's supposed to be all about justice, and this is an opportunity for the legislature to prove to the people of Mississippi that they too want justice.
Dana, is this something that you guys just came across? I mean, it seems like that, knowing how you folks feel about this, and I think a lot of people do, that we would address this early. What happened here?
Well, I think just hearing more of the reports about victims being told to go somewhere else.
Okay.
And
got your attention?
And not understanding, is this really happening? And then finding out, yes, it is really happening.
Okay.
And it's something, Gerard, that you would think, why do we have to mandate this? We really shouldn't have to mandate it. But, that's part of my job, I think, is to protect citizens in the state. And these are, these victims need someone to have their back. So, it's unfortunate that we have to put it in the code, but that's what we're trying to do here.
I wonder, Sandy, as you mentioned earlier, that it's probably a small number of criminals, honestly, that are committing these crimes over and over again,
right?
And feel somewhat immune to their crimes. Will this possibly change the landscape of that, and that this will serve as a deterrent, which should be the hope here, right?
Right. So, it absolutely should, and that's a great point. And then and then just to, it's so it's so inspiring to me to hear Representative McLean want to do her job. And, like you were talking about earlier, the legislative process should be about legislators hearing problems and bringing solutions to the table. And, it's about taking care of the people of Mississippi and just addressing the problems and bringing solutions. I mean, it seems pretty easy, really.
Yeah, and I honestly, just in getting to know over the years many of those who serve, I believe they feel that way as well. They just have different views on how to accomplish that goal. Yeah, and that's the way the whole thing works. I mean, that's why we elect people that we think more closely aligned with our viewpoints, and hopefully they all get together and work something out. Yeah.
Yep.
Ladies, appreciate you coming in. Representative Dana McLean and Sandy Middleton with the Center for Violence Prevention. Appreciate y'all coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We're stepping aside for a break in the Element Well studio. Half an hour of Middays remains.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Where do we go from here now that all of the children are growing up? And how do we spend our lives if there's no one to lend us a hand? I don't wanna live here no more. I don't wanna stay here. Ain't gonna spend the rest of my life quietly fading away. Can people play? You take it or you
The Alan Parsons Project there, Rhino. Boy, the NASDAQ, it has fallen even further since the session opened up this morning, down 399, and the Dow down as well. Trump, the president, to announce automobile tariffs at 4 o'clock, and that's what's got the markets all in a tizzy, as they say. Not sure what to make of that. We should at least be aware that as the president has advised and warned that there may be some disturbance as we work with the tariff strategy to achieve some equity in a trade between this country and others. And small business owners' confidence drops to pre-election levels. That, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business Index. It fell to 62.3 in the first quarter. That's down from 69.1 in the quarter post the election. 58% said inflation is their biggest challenge, the highest level since they first asked that question in 2021, even as the rate of price growth is well off the highest seen 3 years ago. Yeah, we're not experiencing 9% inflation. It's still sticky, 2% and change. So small businesses not only believe that there has been some, moderation of inflation, but there's still uncertainty, specifically around tariffs, and they are led to believe that that is going to be inflationary. I'm not sure, honestly, if that's the case or not. I'm not totally convinced of that. What we can say, though, Rhino, is that there's been some positive response to the tariff strategy, and this is what it was all about and how it was meant to play out to start with, and that other countries would see the risk of this country imposing tariffs on their goods, and it's especially with respect to reciprocal tariffs. And I completely support that policy. You're going to charge us this, we're going to charge you the same dang thing. Well, Reuters reported yesterday that India, that's one of our big trading partners, they're eyeing a tariff cut on more than half of the U.S. imports to shield their exports. Well, that's the way it's supposed to work. That's exactly how it works. Now, I think if India were to announce such a move, we see now that we have a disparity between what we charge and what the U.S. charges on our stuff. Yeah, we're going to bring that more in line. That would be a positive factor in markets, no doubt about it. So we're going to sit tight and see what happens. But I think that's why the markets are plummeting somewhat today. They're just nervous about what this announcement could entail. And then, I know how it works. If it comes out and that wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be, which has been the case so far. That's why we had a bump last week. Then we're off to the races again. I also caught a report, something that the president has been talking about quite a bit, is just other nations paying their fair share to defend the world against bad actors. The United States, as you guys know, spends considerably more on its defense budget than other countries do, and even spends a larger percentage, which is the more meaningful measurement benchmark of its GDP on defense than other countries do. The U.S. comes in at nearly 4% now of its GDP on defense, and a lot of these other EU nations, NATO nations, less than 1%. It's been that way for a while, and the president really was the first president that I can recall that ever pointed out that disparity. And he scolded them a little bit. You got to step up. You're getting the main benefit here, more of the benefit than honestly we are, just because of your proximity to the bad guys. But we're footing the bill. So I think he was right in pointing that out. $968 billion, the U.S. defense budget for 24, and looking at China, 235, less than a third. Russia, 146, Germany, 86. We light a match to like $80 billion on a regular basis, don't we, Rhino? Looking at Germany's total budget. France, 64. Japan, 53. Come on.
Well, technically Japan's not allowed to militarize.
Why's that?
The treaty that ended World War II.
Oh, I didn't know that precluded them.
Yeah, they're not allowed to have a standing military.
Okay.
Every armed member in what we would consider to be their military is a member of a police force.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting.
Now, there are Japanese nationalists that have been pushing for decades to fight against that decision and to allow themselves to arm up, especially with North Korean aggression and Russia looking more and more like an aggressor.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that concerns me, just thinking in terms of our fiscal situation, is it seems like the Republicans are really committed to increasing spending on our military yet again. The Hawks want another $200 billion for the Pentagon as to be part of the big, beautiful budget bill. $200 billion. Now, that's over 10 years. So that would bring the DOD's budget to well over $1 trillion a year. Wow. So that kind of slaps in the face the idea that Republicans are committed to reducing spending, and I'm still somewhat upset hearing the powerful Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin discuss that situation this morning. Yeah, we need to think about returning to pre-COVID 2019 spending levels, which are about $2.5 trillion less than present day on an annual basis. We need to return to those levels and adjust it for inflation and population growth. Okay, I could live with that. Except you said that we're not cutting this, we're not cutting that, we're not cutting this, and by the way, we're adding more to the military complex. So what are you going to cut there, Senator? Have you seen anybody come forth with anything concrete? This is what we're cutting. Nothing. Now, I'm not talking about the stupid, wasteful spending that the Doge team has been involved in, and that's a little over $100 billion at this point, and that's certainly nothing to sneeze at. But we're a couple months in.
That's partly why you're not seeing anybody from Congress come out and say we should cut that, because look at the gnashing of teeth that the 80-20 kind of nonsensical spending that's been discovered by Doge, that only the most ardent lunatic leftists are arguing against. The craziness that's come out of a couple $100 billion. Imagine what happens when a congressman goes, yeah, we should drop $1 trillion out of that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so we've seen reports, have we not, recently of death threats against Elon Musk. So I'm sure he's got full-time security all over the place to protect him.
Now, don't let that sound like an excuse. It's the reason why they're being chicken.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
They get paid well enough. They have plenty of fringe benefits to deal with whatever backlash they get, except the backlash of not getting reelected. And they hate even thinking about that.
It's
Doesn't
crazy.
matter which side of the aisle you're on.
It's totally crazy. Some of the crazy stuff spending though during the Biden administration, and it's just so predictable because almost all of it deals with race and gender. They're so obsessed with that. And I hope they keep doing it because they really don't have any vision. They don't have any practical policies. They don't have any ideas. But
it's because they spent all their time and energy the last 4 years propping up a Weekend at Bernie's situation.
That's so true.
The dude barely knew where he was at any given time.
That is so true. So there's money that was going out to researchers in the university environment. I mean, this is what's just crazy. Gender researchers. What the hell is a gender researcher?
A waste of time, energy, and oxygen.
Oh, gosh. So they were supposed to travel transgender medical conferences and dole out pronoun pins and payments to activists. That's what
right.
People are mad about. Coming right back, final segment of Middays.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Tall, could have used a few pounds. Tight pants points, hollering out. She was a black-haired beauty with big dark eyes and points all her own, sitting way up high. Way up firm and high. Out past the cornfields where the woods got heavy. Out in the back seat of my 60 Chevy, working on mysteries without any clues.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Thanks so much for joining us. It's absolutely heartbreaking that this discussion, this is on the C Spire text line, is even necessary. What can average people do to help victims get the help they need? Talking about requiring this bill that would require emergency rooms in hospitals in Mississippi to have rape kits on hand. And
well, I have one idea.
What's that?
How the average person could help. But you have to live in Mississippi Senate District 7. It involves unelecting the idiot Hob Bryan.
I can't figure it out, man. I just...
Dude's been in office longer than I've been alive.
Well, you know something, and we don't have time to get into it.
And his one claim to fame was writing the failed MAEP.
That's absolutely true.
That and crying about trees. The rest of the time, he's been a worthless, feckless waste of oxygen.
So I was going to say this as well, Rhino. So, you know, we've talked about the public employees retirement system many, many times. I believe I'm right in saying that when some of these bad decisions were made by the legislature that really set the PERS system on this path to insolvency without serious action, he was in the Senate at the time. And I've heard other senators ask him, what were you guys thinking when you put these policies in place? Well, the PERS people told us it's what we ought to do. Okay, great. That's really doing your due diligence, isn't it? So the health department was someone on call to go administer the rape kit. I mean, why though, guys? Why can't a hospital do that? I mean, I maybe I'm oversimplifying this, Rhino. I don't know. It just seems like this ought to be something they'd want to do. You know, you got somebody that comes into your ER that's probably got. If they went to the ER, it was more than just being raped, right? They probably also have were harmed physically, which. I'm no expert on this. My wife is read a lot about this subject, and she maintains, and I know you keep up with this kind of stuff, that it's not about the sexual aspect of it. It's about the control. It's about a male, usually a very weak male, right? A disturbingly weak male need to prove themselves, assert control over a more vulnerable person, such as a female. You're shaking your head. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
So, I can't imagine. So, my guess is they're showing up at the ER. They've probably got evidence of other injuries that they would want to get to the bottom of that. Because that in itself is like, wait, you didn't do this to yourself. Somebody else inflicted this on you. Let's go find them and lock their butts up. And if you can prove rape, well, that's a much more serious charge associated with just harming somebody, plain assault, I guess, if there is such a thing. Nonetheless, Larry Amai says, how do you think Jeff Goldberg got that information? Well, he got that information because he was admitted into this Signal chat room, I think inadvertently, and Mike Waltz has admitted as much at this point. Let's see here. How in the world? Let's see. I got that. Yeah, Rhino, man, he's an encyclopedia. You're right. Mo says, as much as I agree with the military spending until they can pass an audit, I'm against any increases. Rhino and I, we've said that so many times on this program, and it's a bit mind-boggling and somewhat maddening that we have Republicans saying, yeah, we're going to give them another $200 million. That's billion. That's $20 billion a year on top of their $900 and something billion budget today. And I point that out more than anything, Mose, is like, okay, well, what are we going to cut? You guys keep telling us we're going to return to pre-pandemic spending. Every day, is there not? Some Republican in Washington says, we got to cut the spending. Do you not hear that every deadgum day? But if you try to get specifics, you won't get any, because to stop the fear-mongering, they say, oh, but not Social Security, not Medicare, not veterans benefits, we can't touch debt interest, and by the way, we're adding more money to military. Well, hell, that's the whole budget. Give us some idea of what you're going to cut. Because once you eliminate all that long laundry list, you're down to about 15% of government, and that 15% amounts to about $800 billion. I'm not saying that's nothing, but you're looking at a $2.5 trillion deficit. Find me another $1.7 trillion. And let's have
I'm happy with Elon's idea. Get rid of 80% of this nonsense.
I'm with you. I'm for it. Well, Ray and Gluckstadt says they're so tolerant, though. William and Brandon says the best radio I've ever heard is Paul Gallo going at it with Bob Bryan. Yeah, those were classic, no doubt. We're out of here today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
SuperTalk Mississippi Media Production.